This is Sidleways, Episode 1. Who has two thumbs, a bookshop, and a huge headache? When I last saw my uncle, he was a slightly out of this world character. His stories were fantastic, and until recently, something I thought was funny. He often would come over for family holidays in what he referred to as a dressing gown and carpet slippers. I never saw him wearing sensible shoes. I thought how TSA might be way easier in slippers than shoes, but it turns out that was more of a personal quirk than a travel hack. He was British, so I assumed that his particularities were just a bit of differences with the culture. That was until he died mysteriously and left me his bookshop. Officially, it's located not too far from the locations of the Jack the Ripper murders in Whitechapel, but that was only where I found the bookshop. So I took ownership of it, not really knowing what I got myself into. Uncle Frank didn't just leave me a bookshop, he left me a mysterious plot device that I'm now trapped in for the foreseeable future. That bookshop, it moves. The first morning was a bit of a shock. I started noticing the sounds of a city, not car noises and sirens, but the sounds of a different kind of city, a Discworld city. My uncle and I shared a fondness for Terry Pratchett, and there was to us, not a better author. His combination of fantasy and social commentary made for not only a world rich with magic and fantasy, but something that mirrored our worldview about the nature of people. Now, he has some things to say about bookshops. Pratchett did. People who dared venture in reported that he seemed surprised at finding the shop had people in it, that he clearly expected it to be a bit of a quiet day. That's what I pictured. A little dust, a little eccentricity, and plenty of silence. The kind of place that smells like old pages and bloody-mindedness. You could just settle in. But the shop wasn't just that. It was something else entirely. It doesn't stay put. It's not magical in the wand-waving fireball sort of way. There's something subtler going on. Stranger, the whole building, walls, shelves, roof, every book in it changes. Not metaphorically, literally. It's connected to L-space. So L-space is, a concept within the Pratchett books. And what he said about it is books bend space and time. Not as a metaphor, as physics. In the Discworld sense, where meaning carries weight and stories create gravity, Pratchett explained it like this. Matter equals mass, and mass distorts space. It distorts it in a polyfractal L-space. So while the Dewey system has its fine points, when you're setting out to look something up in the multi-dimensional folds of L-space, what you really need is a ball of string. That's from the book Guards. L-space isn't a place, it's an effect. Stack enough books in one spot and reality begins to wobble. And once a shop is part of L-space, it doesn't always stay on the same street or even in the same universe. All libraries everywhere are connected in L-space. All libraries everywhere. And Pratchett said, one reason the owners of those aforesaid little rambling, pokey, secondhand bookshops always seem slightly unearthly is that many of them really are having strayed into this world after taking a wrong turning in their own bookshops, and worlds where it's considered commendable business practice to wear carpet slippers all the time and open your shop only when you feel like it. And that's a pretty good description of my uncle. I used to think that it was just a clever bit of writing. Uncle Frank never let it slip that not only was that a clever idea, but also that was the reality of his life. I don't question it anymore. One morning I wake up and it's all completely different, inside and out. The shop follows the rules of where it is and when it is. So here in the Discworld, it's changing all the time. Like the whole place has a mind of its own, or minds. Multiple is never a good thing. It feels like there could be more than one mystery here. And when I opened the front door again, it wasn't London anymore. I stepped out into a place that was different. The air was thicker, the noise sharper, the color of light just slightly off. At first, I didn't know where I was at all. It took some awkward conversations with passerbys to piece it all together. A fruit seller with produce that had an alarming number of eyes on him. I found out later he was an Igor. Said, "You're new to Ankh-Morpork, right?" Another woman laughed when I asked what city this was and said, "You're choking on our smoke and our special eau de toilette, aren't you?" That makes it Ankh-Morpork. And that's when it clicked. I knew the name. I've read it quite a few times. I just never expected to walk into it. Since my unexpected travel to Discworld, I've learned a few things about the reality and rules of this universe. It's not what you call consistent or logical. Magic exists, and there is the spellbook and wand kind, but it's also unpredictable, half-regulated, mostly held in check by laziness and bureaucracy. Technology here is just as strange. It's not medieval, not steampunk. It's sort of a post-industrial Victorian thing. Um, it's weird. They have semaphore towers instead of telegraphs, water pumps powered by golems, and entire systems run by overworked clerks and minor miracles. Even a crime's bureaucratic. If someone robs you, you get a receipt. There's a thieves guild, an assassins guild, a beggars guild, and a seamstress guild, and apparently only one needle. Nothing here works because it makes sense. It works because somehow it does. A mixture of cynicism and hope for the future, and a reality just sort of goes along with that. Some are strange, some are oddly practical, and some make a worrying amount of sense once you stop thinking like a human and start thinking like a story, which is stories have a power of their own, and they shape the highly malleable reality around them. Ankh-Morpork is not a city. It's described by Sam Vimes, the commander of the watch, as a woman, a very large woman. It's a living thing with alleys instead of veins and shouting instead of a heartbeat. It smells like hot metal, cold stew, soot, cabbage, and opportunity. I know it from the books. I know the guilds, the watch, the clacks towers, the river that qualifies as a solid on most days, the smell of which is hardly describable. But standing in it is different. The sounds are sharper, the sense of story heavier. Did I mention I can't really describe what it smells like here? In almost every way, it's overwhelming. I stepped outside. A man offered me a rat on a stick. Somewhere in the distance, faint but distinct, I heard skittering sounds of hundreds of tiny rhythmic feet. A wave of pitter-patter sounds on cobblestone. It almost passed unnoticed by the crowd, but it made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up, and I didn't really put it all together yet. I didn't know what it meant. I just knew I'd hear it again. In fact, I heard it somewhere behind me out of sight every time I moved. A dwarf marched past, muttering to himself. Although I'm not sure if he's a himself or herself. With dwarves, it's known that females hardly advertise their gender, although I might have seen a hint of lipstick. I passed a small scruffy dog sitting on a corner watching the crowd with what I could only describe as disdain. As I walked by, I heard it say woof. Distinctly. Not barked. Said woof. I froze, looked back. It was scratching itself with one leg like any other dog. Did you just speak? He said woof. Again, as I continued. I thought I'd heard him whisper, everyone knows dogs can't talk. Maybe it was just my imagination, or maybe this was just the kind of city where dogs had opinions. I mean, a golem was sweeping the cobblestones like it was a sacred duty. No one seemed surprised I appeared out of nowhere. The bookshop, I learned, landed on Dagon Street in the Shades. The Shades, the part of the city where even shadows get nervous, where the watch doesn't go there, ever. Where doors creak in languages you don't want translated, people here don't ask questions. They trade in glances and silence. Here and there are signs of the low rent, low down. Imagine that it was much like Whitechapel in the Jack the Ripper days. Even the mist is weird. Everyone keeps mentioning the time that the Three Jolly Luck takeaway fish bar opened here. It served one customer, then vanished overnight, leaving behind scorch marks and small bones. That's from the book Moving Pictures. And apparently, compared to that, I barely qualify as unusual, since I still have all my parts. I spent the next few days trying to make sense of the shop. One morning, I caught movement out of the corner of the baseboards, and there were a few rodents scrambling under a shelf. Nothing unusual until I noticed one of them seemed to be dragging a scrap of parchment and muttering under its breath. After mentioning this to a local, they mentioned that the odd thing wasn't the way the rats were behaving. It was the parchment, because apparently rats have a difficult time with reading and writing. Normally. Whatever that means. Later, I learned that rodents who sleep too close to the University of Magic tend to pick up more than just fleas. Sapience, it turns out, is a contagion in the city. The shelves rearranged themselves. New books appeared. One hummed, one had no title, one seemed to smell faintly of oranges and fire. Then the customers came, and I guess I didn't get to the clothesline fast enough. He walked in like he already owned the place, tall, pale, and smelled faintly of boot polish and regret. He looked around and found a small antique wooden trunk with a pattern of painted pink flowers all over it. I barely noticed it and could have sworn that it wasn't in that spot just a moment ago, but often I can't figure out what I've done with something I set down a moment ago, and I might have been mistaken. He asked me how much for the box, and I go, it's not for sale. And he's like, everything has a price. And I'm like, no, this doesn't. And then I continue to explain, honestly, I just took over the shop and I'm still pricing everything. In fact, I meant to have a close sign out. I'm not really open right now. He left quietly, maybe too quietly. I get the feeling it's not the last time I'm going to see that guy. I sell books, not trunks, right? 10 minutes later, a student wizard burst in, pointing at the trunk. Is that sapient pearwood? He said it like I left a live shark in a paddling pool. For those of us afraid of sharks in swimming pools, they can't survive the chlorine. Just saw it on a video on the internet once, just thought I'd share. Sapient pearwood is rare, dangerous, semi-sentient, and famously loyal, and famously violent. He said I was lucky it hadn't eaten anyone yet. Which begs to question, where do you get insurance for a storage item? She seems to be a relative of the trunk Two Flower has in the Color of Magic, and I get why it would be a benefit to have one of these babies as protection, especially in a bookshop that doesn't seem to stay in one place, so at least I'm not completely on my own. After he left, I checked it again. The trunk hadn't moved, but one of the clasps was in a slightly different position, and I think it winked at me. I was a little put off by the pattern of pink flowers painted all over the trunk, not what you'd expect on a deadly magical artifact, and it was smaller than I remembered the sapient pearwood luggage from the books was described as. Almost endearingly so, a little absurd. I found a note inside from my Uncle Frank. The trunk came with the shop. It even had a name, apparently, Mona Lisa, because she doesn't have any eyebrows, just like the painting. Mona Lisa wasn't just a trunk. She was company. A companion, slightly absurd and unmistakably alive. That regal, distant kind, like a cat that might permit a pet if the lighting was right and your manners were adequate, and it was too tired to run away. A princess, really. One who clearly believed the shop existed for her benefit. Like a cat that decided I was its person. Just a bit more bitey. I'm going to need protection. This isn't just a city, it's a setting, and I'm walked into a story without knowing the plot. There's also the journal my uncle left. It didn't read the whole thing yet, but I did notice that it sat untouched on the desk open to his last entry, and it seemed to just end abruptly. Is that a bit mysterious? No? Like I need more things to worry about. I plan to go to the Mended Drum, apparently. It's the kind of place where you meet the right kind of wrong people if you survive the first drink. The librarian drinks there from time to time. Not a librarian, the librarian. The next episode might involve an orangutan who understands interdimensional physics better than anyone. And just to be clear, don't call him a monkey, ever. It's apparently very triggering and violence will ensue. He can't seem to help himself. There are worse flaws. You can call him an anthropoid, orangutan, librarian, or Alpine. However, apparently a spell has changed him in the past, and it just seemed to be more his real shape than human was. It does give him more gravitas when it comes to returning your library books. So I'm going to sidle over to the Mended Drum and see where that lead takes me, and hope for the best in this crazy city. Thank you for listening to Sidleways. Please like, subscribe, and turn on notification and all that self-promotion stuff. I hope you like it. It's obvious that I'm using the framework and Stealing Like an Artist of Terry Pratchett, and you can call it fan fiction or whatever. I was also influenced by the Stephen King Book Club on YouTube for his series of travel podcasts based on the world of King. I found it additive and it made me want to go back and enjoy the author. I'm hoping to do that with one of my favorite authors, and since there are no longer any more Discworld books and I'm making myself crazy listening to them over and over again, I thought this might just be therapeutic as well as something others might enjoy. So, thank you so much, and, this is Sidleways.